The roast chicken sat untouched on my plate as Grandma Eleanor's words echoed across the dining room. 23 relatives had gathered for our monthly Sunday dinner at the family estate, and apparently today's agenda included dismantling what remained of my connection to our family history. Emma, you need to be reasonable about this, my mother added, dabbing her mouth with a linen napkin. David and Jennifer have 3 children now. They need the space. I took a slow sip of water, letting the conversation continue around me. My older brother David sat at the far end of the table, nodding solemnly as if this were a grave responsibility he was reluctantly accepting rather than a property he'd been angling to acquire for the past 2 years. The cabin has been in our family for 60 years, I said quietly. Grandpa built it himself. Which is exactly why it should go to someone who'll use it properly. Aunt Patricia interjected. She'd never liked me much, not since I'd chosen business school over joining her interior design firm. David's children need summers at the lake. What would you do there? Sit alone with your laptop. The cabin in question wasn't just any property. It was a 3-bedroom cedar structure on Crystal Lake, built by my grandfather in 1963. He'd taught me to fish from its dock, to identify constellations from its back deck, to appreciate the sound of morning loons across still water. When he passed 5 years ago, he'd left it in a family trust with the understanding that his grandchildren would share it. David had other plans. I've already spoken with the moving company, David announced, pulling out his phone to show the confirmation email. They can have our furniture up there by next weekend. Jennifer's already picked out new curtains for the sunroom. That was presumptuous, I observed. That was efficient, my father corrected. Your brother is thinking ahead, planning for his family's future. Maybe if you'd focused less on your career and more on building a life, we wouldn't be having this conversation. I was 32 years old. I'd graduated top of my class from Wharton, spent 5 years at Goldman Sachs, and then done something my family still didn't understand. I'd quit to start my own investment firm. They saw it as throwing away a prestigious career. They didn't see the 12-hour days I spent analyzing property markets, the weekends devoted to understanding commercial real estate portfolios, or the strategic partnerships I'd built with developers across the region. They certainly didn't see the $340 million in assets I currently managed. Emma hasn't even visited the cabin in 2 years. David continued. I was up there last month. The dock needs repairs, the roof has missing shingles, and the boathouse is practically falling apart. Jennifer and I are prepared to invest in proper maintenance. With whose money? I asked. David's jaw tightened. We're doing well. My promotion last quarter. Your promotion to regional sales manager. Congratulations, I'm sure the extra $15,000 annually will cover extensive property renovations. That's enough, Grandma Eleanor said sharply. This isn't about money, this is about family. About children having the same experiences we had. David is offering to preserve our legacy. What are you offering? I could have told them. I could have explained that I'd been monitoring Crystal Lake's development for 3 years. That I knew the lake's northern shore was owned by the Peterson Family Trust, which had recently entered probate. That the southern commercial strip had been quietly acquired by a Delaware LLC, I'd identified as a front for a larger development group. That the western properties, including our family cabin, were part of a planned upscale community project that would transform the entire area. Instead, I said, I need to think about it. There's nothing to think about, my father said firmly. The cabin goes to David. This discussion is over. After dinner, I walked down to the estate's garden, pulling out my phone. My business partner Marcus answered on the first ring. How's family dinner? He asked. They want to give the lake cabin to my brother. The Crystal Lake property. Emma, that's I know what it is. I watched fireflies beginning their evening dance across the lawn. What's the status on the lakefront acquisition? Marcus was quiet for a moment. The Peterson Trust accepted our offer yesterday. We close on Friday. That gives us properties 1 through 17 on the northern shore, plus the marina and beach club. The southern commercial strip closes next week, restaurants, shops, the outdoor recreation center. We're still negotiating on the western residential section. How many properties in the western section? 17 parcels. Most are older cabins like your family's. Owners are elderly, some are interested in selling. Others are holding out for sentimental reasons. It's complicated. I thought about my grandfather's weathered hands teaching me to tie fishing knots. About his stories of building the cabin himself, hauling lumber across the frozen lake in winter. About his hope that his grandchildren would preserve what he'd built. Make offers on all 17 properties, I said. 20% above market value. Close within 30 days. Emma, that's over $40 million for the western section alone. Combined with the northern properties and commercial strip, you're looking at total acquisition costs of. I know what I'm looking at, Marcus. A complete lakefront development spanning 34 properties, commercial infrastructure, and recreational facilities. The kind of integrated community that attracts families with money. We control the entire lake. And your family cabin. Included in the offers. Same terms as the others. Your family will have to agree to sell. I smiled in the darkness. My brother just told 23 relatives he's taking possession next weekend. He's not on the trust documents. I am, along with my father, who'll be very interested in a substantial cash offer for a property he's already decided my brother should have. Marcus whistled softly. You're really doing this. Crystal Lake has been undervalued for decades because of fragmented ownership. We consolidate it, invest in infrastructure, position it as a premier lakefront community, and we're looking at a development worth $500 million within 5 years. This isn't about revenge, Marcus. This is business. But it was also about my grandfather's hands teaching me to see value where others saw decay. About understanding that sometimes preserving a legacy meant transforming it entirely. The next morning, I sat in my downtown office reviewing property surveys when my assistant buzzed through. Your father is here. He doesn't have an appointment. Send him in. My father entered with the purposeful stride of a man accustomed to getting his way. He'd built a successful insurance brokerage, sold it for 8 figures, and now spent his time managing the family's various trusts and investments. Or what he thought were the family's significant holdings. Emma, we need to discuss your attitude yesterday. Would you like coffee? I'd like you to sign the cabin transfer documents. He placed a folder on my desk. I've had our attorney draw up papers, officially granting David primary use of the property. You'll retain nominal ownership through the trust, but all decisions regarding the property go through him. I opened the folder, scanning the documents. They were exactly what I'd expected, legally binding, carefully worded, and completely dismissive of my interests. These papers require my signature as co-trustee, which you'll provide because it's the right thing to do for this family. I closed the folder. I have a counter-proposal. I'd like to purchase the cabin from the trust. Market value, cash offer, 30-day close. My father laughed. Emma, you can't afford that property. Do you have any idea what lakefront real estate costs? The cabin's most recent assessment valued it at $1.2 million. I'm offering $1.5 million. His laughter stopped. That's you don't have that kind of capital. I manage a $340 million investment portfolio, Dad. I have the capital. You manage other people's money. That's not the same as having your own wealth. I pulled up my personal banking dashboard, turning the monitor so he could see it. The primary account showed a balance of $18.4 million. My father stared at the screen, his face cycling through confusion, disbelief, and something that might have been respect. How did you 5 years of strategic investments? I started with $200,000 from my Goldman bonus. Turned it into 8 figures through commercial real estate acquisitions, property development projects, and equity partnerships. The firm I built isn't just managing money, it's generating it. And you never told us. You never asked. You assumed I was struggling because I left a traditional career path. You assumed my choices were failures because they didn't match your definition of success. My father sat down heavily. Your mother and I thought. We worried you were living beyond your means, that you were too proud to ask for help. I didn't need help. I needed time to build something real. He looked at the transfer documents, then at my screen. David really wants that cabin. David wants a free vacation property he can't afford to maintain. I'm offering to buy it at above market value, which means the trust benefits, and you can give David the cash to buy something more suitable for his family. It won't be the same. The cabin has history. Then perhaps David should have thought about that, before treating it as an asset to acquire rather than a legacy to preserve. My father left without signing anything, but I'd seen the calculation in his eyes. He was a businessman, whatever his other faults. A $1.5 million cash offer was hard to refuse. 2 days later, Marcus called with an update. We've got signatures on 14 of the 17 Western properties. 3 holdouts, the Morrison family, an elderly couple named the Johnsons, and your family cabin. The Morrisons, their son manages their affairs, wants $200,000 above our offer, says it's a matter of principle. Give it to him. What about the Johnsons? They don't want to sell at any price. The husband has Alzheimer's. The wife says the cabin is the only place he still recognizes. I was quiet for a moment, thinking about my grandfather's final summers at the lake, how the familiar surroundings had anchored him as his health declined. Take them off the list. We'll work around their property, offer to maintain their dock, and handle their property taxes for life. Make sure they know they're welcome to stay. That's generous. That's decent. What about the marina acquisition? Closes tomorrow. The commercial strip closes Monday. Emma, this is really happening. By the end of next week, you'll control virtually the entire lakefront, except for one cabin. My father called that afternoon. The family trust has voted to accept your offer on the cabin. David is upset. I'm sure he is. He'd like to speak with you. He knows my number. But David didn't call. Instead, he showed up at my office late Friday afternoon, his face flushed with anger. You bought the cabin out from under me. I bought it from the family trust at fair market value. You were never the owner, David. I had plans for that property. Jennifer already ordered custom furniture. Then perhaps you should have secured ownership before making purchases. He paced my office, agitated. This is about revenge. About making me look foolish in front of the family. This is about a property that means something to me. That you assumed I'd simply hand over, because you have children and I don't. You're punishing me for having a family. I'm protecting an asset that I value. There's a difference. David stopped pacing, his expression shifting. What are you going to do with it? You never visit. You'll let it decay. Actually, I'm planning extensive renovations. The property is part of a larger development project I'm undertaking at Crystal Lake. What kind of development project? The kind that transforms undervalued lakefront property into a premier residential community. He stared at me. You're buying up the lake. I've already bought it. 34 properties, including commercial infrastructure, recreational facilities, and the marina. The cabin was the final piece. That's how much money did that cost. More than you'd believe I had access to. David sat down slowly. The family thinks you're barely getting by. Mom said you probably shop at discount stores. Mom hasn't seen my closet. I don't understand. Why let us think you were struggling? I considered the question, because I learned early that family expectations and business success don't always align. You all had very specific ideas about what my life should look like. When I chose a different path, it was easier to let you think I'd failed than to constantly justify my choices. That's dishonest. That's strategic. I built something real, while you all assumed I was lost. Now I own the lake where we spent our childhood, and I get to decide what happens to it. David was quiet for a long moment. The moving truck is coming tomorrow. I told the kids they'd have the cabin for summer. You'll need to cancel it. Jennifer will be devastated. Jennifer can be devastated. You made promises you had no authority to keep. He stood up, angry again. You know what? Grandpa would be disappointed in you. He built that cabin for family, not for some corporate development project. Grandpa built that cabin because he understood the value of property and legacy. He taught me to see potential where others saw only the surface. Every lesson he shared about the lake, about building, about patience. I learned those lessons. You learned how to fish, and then forgot about the cabin for years, until you decided you wanted a free vacation house. David left without another word. The following Tuesday, I drove up to Crystal Lake for the first time in 18 months. The 2-hour drive from the city gave me time to think about what came next. The lake spread before me, pristine and blue under the summer sun. I'd spent the past 4 days coordinating with contractors, architects, and the local planning commission. The development I envisioned would take 3 years to complete. Carefully renovated cabins, maintaining their rustic character, upgraded infrastructure, hidden underground, a world-class marina with electric boat rentals, walking trails, connecting all the properties, and a central community center where families could gather. The kind of place my grandfather had imagined when he first built here 60 years ago. I pulled up to the family cabin just as a moving truck was backing down the narrow drive. David stood on the porch, directing two workers who were carrying furniture toward the truck. I parked and walked over. I thought you'd have canceled the truck. David wouldn't meet my eyes. We'd already paid for it. Jennifer wanted to at least see the place one more time. His wife Jennifer stood near the water with their 3 children. The kids were throwing stones into the lake, laughing. She waved at me uncertainly. David, what's going on? He sighed. We were loading furniture we'd bought for the cabin. Might as well use the truck to return it. You were moving furniture into a property you don't own. I thought Dad said the sale wasn't final yet, that there might be complications with the closing. I figured if we just hit possession, I'd have a harder time removing you. Something like that. A silver Mercedes pulled up behind my car, and Marcus stepped out, followed by a woman in a business suit I recognized as Laura Vance, the property attorney handling our acquisitions. Miss Martinez, Laura said, walking over with a folder. The final closing documents for the cabin. The property is officially registered under Summit Crest Holdings as of 9 o'clock this morning. David looked at the documents, then at me. Summit Crest Holdings. My primary development company. You own a development company. I own several. This one specializes in lakefront properties. A black SUV pulled up next, and a man in a security uniform stepped out. Miss Martinez, I'm Tom Wilson from Lakeshore Security Services. You called about establishing property access protocols. I turned to David. You need to remove any furniture you brought here. This property is now part of an active development site, and access is restricted to authorized personnel only. David's face went red. You're having me removed by security. I'm establishing necessary boundaries. You attempted to take possession of a property you don't own. That requires a clear response. Jennifer walked over, holding her youngest daughter's hand. David, what's happening? Emma bought the cabin. She's kicking us out. I'm not kicking you out. You were never legally here. You attempted to move into a property without permission from the owner. Jennifer looked at the cabin, then at her children playing by the water. They've been so excited about having a summer place. David showed them pictures, told them about the bedrooms they'd have. David made promises he couldn't keep. Because you manipulated the situation. David said sharply, you knew I wanted this property. You could have talked to me, worked something out. Instead you went behind everyone's back, and bought it out of spite. I bought it because it's mine. Because Grandpa left it to the family trust, and I'm part of that trust. Because when the trust voted to sell, I made the highest offer. There's nothing manipulative about that. It's straightforward business. Everything's business with you, isn't it? David grabbed a box from the porch. You can't just be a person. You have to be a deal maker, an investor, someone proving how smart you are. I'm someone who built something real while you all assumed I was failing. That's not about being smart. It's about being underestimated. The moving truck finished loading the furniture, and David signed the driver's paperwork. Jennifer gathered the children, who complained about leaving. There are public beaches around the lake. I said to Jennifer, your kids can still enjoy the water. It's not the same, she said quietly. David grew up here. He wanted that for our children. David grew up visiting, occasionally during summers. He romanticized those memories into something they never were. The cabin was always my grandfather's retreat, not a family commune. David loaded his kids into his SUV. Before getting in, he turned back to me. When Mom and Dad find out how you're treating us, how you're destroying the family cabin. The family cabin is being preserved and renovated as part of a thoughtfully designed community. If you were interested in preservation, you'd have visited more than twice in the past 5 years. You'd have contributed to maintenance, instead of letting the dock rot and the roof deteriorate. Don't confuse nostalgia with care, David. He drove off, and I stood watching until his vehicle disappeared around the bend. Marcus walked over. That was intense. That was necessary. We spent the next hour touring the property with Laura and the security coordinator, establishing access protocols and reviewing renovation plans. The cabin would retain its original structure, but we'd rebuild the foundation, replace the roof, upgrade all systems, and restore the boathouse to full functionality. My grandfather had built something beautiful here. I was going to make sure it lasted another 60 years. The family dinner that Sunday was predictably hostile. David had spent the week telling everyone his version of events, painting me as a vengeful sibling who'd stolen his children's inheritance. I arrived late, walking into the dining room to find 23 relatives already seated. The conversation died as I entered. "Emma," my mother said coldly, "how generous of you to join us." I took my seat. I was delayed reviewing architectural plans. "For the family cabin you stole from your brother," Aunt Patricia added. "For the property I legally purchased from the family trust at above market value." "You knew David wanted it," my father said. "You could have shown some family consideration." I showed business consideration. The trust made $300,000 more than the property's assessed value. That benefits everyone in the trust. Grandma Eleanor set down her fork with a sharp click. "Money isn't everything, Emma. That cabin represents our history, your grandfather's legacy, and you've turned it into some kind of corporate investment. I've turned it into a preserved property that will last for generations." David wanted a free vacation house he couldn't afford to maintain. "He wanted to give his children the experiences we gave you," my mother said. "He wanted the appearance of those experiences without the work or investment they require." David leaned forward. "Tell them the rest, Emma. Tell them how you're buying up the entire lake. How you're turning Crystal Lake into some kind of resort development." The table went silent. "Is that true?" my father asked. Summit Crest Holdings has acquired 34 lakefront properties, including commercial infrastructure and recreational facilities. We're developing an integrated residential community focused on preserving the lake's natural character while providing modern amenities. "You're building a resort," Aunt Patricia said, "on our family lake. I'm building a community. There's a difference." "How did you afford this?" my mother demanded. "David said you bought millions of dollars in property. Where did you get that kind of money?" I pulled out my phone, opening my banking app. I passed it to my mother, who stared at the screen showing my personal accounts, investment portfolios, and business holdings. "Is this real?" she whispered. "That's my personal wealth." Summit Crest Holdings manages an additional $340 million in client assets and development projects. The phone passed around the table, each family member's expression shifting from disbelief to shock to something like fear. "You're worth over $20 million, my father said. "My personal liquid assets are approximately $22 million. Total net worth, including business equity and property holdings, is closer to 60. Grandma Eleanor took the phone last, studying it carefully. "When did this happen?" "Over the past 7 years. I've been building the business since I left Goldman Sachs." "And you never told us," my mother said. "You never asked. You assumed I was struggling because I didn't follow a traditional path. You decided I was a failure because my success didn't look like yours." David slumped in his chair. "You let me think I was doing better than you. You let the whole family think you needed help. I let you believe what you wanted to believe. It was easier than explaining myself repeatedly to people who'd already decided I'd made wrong choices." "This is manipulative," Aunt Patricia insisted. "You built this secret empire while pretending to be something else. I built a business while you all made assumptions. Those aren't the same thing." My father studied me carefully. "What are your plans for Crystal Lake?" "Thoughtful development. Each cabin will be renovated, maintaining its original character. We're adding a community center, upgraded marina, nature trails, and environmental protection measures. Properties will be sold to carefully vetted families who understand and appreciate the lake's legacy, and our cabin will be the model for the entire development. Fully restored, preserved exactly as Grandpa intended, but upgraded to last another century." "You're going to sell it?" my mother asked. "Eventually, yes. To a family who'll actually take care of it." David stood up abruptly. I would have taken care of it. You couldn't afford to take care of it. The property needs $200,000 in immediate repairs, then ongoing maintenance costs of $30,000 annually. Your salary barely covers your current housing costs. You wanted a dream you couldn't sustain. So you're saying I'm not good enough. I'm saying you weren't being realistic. There's a difference between wanting something and being able to care for it properly. The dinner ended awkwardly, family members drifting away with uncertain glances in my direction. I helped clear dishes, working alongside my mother in tense silence. You've changed, she finally said. I haven't changed. You're finally seeing who I actually am. The daughter I knew wouldn't have humiliated her brother in front of the family. The daughter you knew was whoever you imagined her to be. You never asked about my business, my goals, or my achievements. You decided I was lost and treated me accordingly. My mother set down a plate carefully. We worried about you. You pitied me. There's a difference. 3 months later, I stood on the rebuilt dock at Crystal Lake, watching the sunset paint the water gold and crimson. The cabin behind me had been completely restored. New roof, reinforced foundation, updated systems, but maintaining every detail of my grandfather's original design. Marcus walked down from the main house, carrying 2 glasses of wine. The final property surveys came back clean. We're ready to start marketing the development next month. Any interest yet? We've had inquiries from 3 families, all pre-qualified buyers, young professionals with kids, looking for weekend retreats. Exactly the demographic we wanted. I sipped the wine, letting the evening air settle around us. My grandfather would have liked this. Your family's still not speaking to you. David sends occasional angry texts. My parents are confused. Grandma Eleanor called once to say I'd betrayed everything our family stood for. Have you? I've preserved what they were ready to give away. I've ensured this lake remains beautiful and accessible. I've built something sustainable instead of letting it decay through neglect and nostalgia. If that's betrayal, I'll accept the label. A black Range Rover pulled up to the cabin, and Jennifer stepped out, looking uncertain. Emma, could we talk? Marcus diplomatically retreated to the marina office. I gestured for Jennifer to join me on the dock. David doesn't know I'm here, she said, sitting down carefully. But I needed to see what you've done with the place. Would you like a tour? We walked through the restored cabin, Jennifer touching walls and running her hands along countertops. It's beautiful, better than I remember. It needed significant work. David wouldn't have been able to afford these repairs. I know, she looked out the window toward the lake. He's been angry, but underneath that, I think he's embarrassed. He promised the kids something he couldn't deliver, and it became about his pride instead of what was actually best. I'm not trying to punish him. I know that too. I've seen the development plans online. What you're building here, it's thoughtful, careful. You're preserving something while making it better. That was always the goal. Jennifer pulled out her phone, showing me photos of their kids. They ask about the lake sometimes. Wonder if they'll ever get to come back. I was quiet for a moment, watching the water. The community center we're building will have programs for local families, swimming lessons, nature education, summer camps. Your kids would be welcome to participate. Really, this place was never about exclusion. It's about creating something lasting. Your children are still part of this lake's history, just differently than David imagined. Jennifer left as the last light faded from the sky. I sat alone on the dock, thinking about my grandfather's hands teaching me to see value, to understand that preservation sometimes requires transformation. My phone buzzed with an email from Marcus. First property sold. The Morrison family bought lot 17. Closing next month. I smiled, looking out across the water I now protected. The lake my grandfather built beside, that my family assumed I'd abandoned, that my brother thought he deserved, it was finally secure, not as a gift or inheritance, or right, but as a legacy properly preserved. 34 properties, one integrated community, and a future built on understanding rather than assumption. The lake reflected stars now, dark water holding light. Somewhere in the renovated cabin behind me, my grandfather's original workbench still stood, his tools arranged as he'd left them. I hadn't changed that. Some things deserved to remain exactly as they were. Everything else, I'd built myself.